Is this thing on? Hello? Hello? Whatever. We're live. What is up, guys? It's Alex Johnson here, the founder and lead analyst at yardsperfantasy.com. Welcome into the 119th episode of the Feed Me Fantasy Podcast. Let's eat. NFL player props are live on BetUS. I just made a TikTok on some of the wide receiver player props I'd be taking, if it were legal to do so here in Massachusetts. The first, I'd be taking the over on Allen Robinson, 7.5 receiving touchdowns. Smashing that over. You already know how much I love A-Rob this year. And the camp reports have done nothing but confirm my priors. He's built to be a red zone monster, and playing in that same role last year, Odell Beckham had 12 red zone targets in 13 games with the Rams. Robinson is going to top that easy. You know who else is going to get red zone monster numbers? That's Cortland Sutton. But I'm actually looking at the receiving line, the yardage for Sutton. At BetUS, they have it at 925.5 receiving yards. I mean, if Sutton can top 1,100 yards with a combination of Joe Flacco, Brandon Allen, and Drew Lock at quarterback, he sure as hell can get over 925 yards with Russell Wilson. I'm also taking the over on Brandon Ayuk. 775.5 receiving yards. He's out of the doghouse, and we forget how good Ayuk is after the catch. Debo's not the only yak monster in San Francisco. But what Debo doesn't do so well is get down the field. And that's where Brandon Ayuk is going to shine with new quarterback Trey Lance, who has a cannon arm. While I actually can't bet on these here in Massachusetts, hopefully you can. And when you sign up for BetUS, use promo code YARDSPER to get a 125% deposit bonus. And that's for any amount you deposit between $50 and $2,500. But today, we're talking about some deep sleepers. Specifically wide receivers with ADPs in the double-digit rounds that aren't necessarily getting a lot of buzz, but should be considered in the later rounds. These are perfect picks in best ball on Underdog Fantasy. And make sure you're using promo code YARDSPER on Underdog to get an instant $100 deposit match. Use that to enter any of their big-time tournaments, like Best Ball Mania with over $10 million in prizes, or the Puppy 3, which just launched this week and is already a quarter of the way full, and it's just a $5 entry and has $1 million in prizes. One of my favorite wide receivers to draft in these underdog tournaments is Josh Palmer. Palmer came into the league as an early third-round pick last year in 2021. He had a mostly quiet rookie season working behind Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Jalen Guyton. He quietly started to come on late in the season, though. Over the last 5 weeks, Palmer earned a 14% target share while averaging 27 routes per game. He scored double-digit fantasy points in 3 of those contests, with finishes of wide receiver 16, wide receiver 21, and wide receiver 32. Palmer capped it off with 9 targets on 43 routes and 128 air yards in the Chargers' dramatic season finale against the Raiders. You guys remember that game? That game was crazy. Crazy. Remember, it was like the Steelers are going to be out only if this game ties. That game was amazing. Amazing. And he almost fucking tied. But Palmer's going to look to build on that momentum in 2022 as he fights to secure the full-time wide receiver 3 role here in training camp. With only Jalen Guyton in his way, it shouldn't be difficult, In the early reports from training camp, the beat reporters in Los Angeles, they indicate that Palmer already has the upper hand. That puts Palmer in an excellent position to be a productive fantasy asset as the wide receiver 3 and one of the most explosive pass offenses in the league with one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. Sure, he'll work behind Allen and Williams, but the team doesn't have an established tight end, nor much wide receiver competition behind him. And if anything were to happen to either of those top 2 wideouts, you now have the wide receiver 2 in the Justin Herbert offense. But another wide receiver 3 on his team that I want this year is KJ Osborne. Osborne finished as a top 24 wide receiver 5 times in 2021. That's despite limited playing time as the wide receiver 3 on an offense that ran 11 personnel at the 5th lowest rate in the league. The good news is the Vikings replaced old man Mike Zimmer and brought in a former quarterback and Rams offensive coordinator, Kevin O'Connell, as their new head coach. If O'Connell runs the Vikings offense anything like he worked with in Los Angeles, we're going to see a lot more opportunities for Osborne. The Rams ran 11 personnel at a league high 86% of the time in 2021. That means Osborne, he's going to get more opportunities for targets in 2022 after he finished top 25 in fantasy points per target in 2021. That's especially now with the loss of Irv Smith to a finger injury during training camp this week. He's reportedly going to be back for the opener, but after missing all of last season and now all of the preseason and most of training camp, it's hard to see him jump right into a significant target share early on in the season. Osborne's going to operate primarily from the slot. He had 40% slot rate in 2021, but he has the size and the athleticism to get open at the perimeter as well. In fact, Osborne's 4.48 speed and 73rd percentile burst, according to playerprofiler.com, that allowed him to see 16 deep targets while accumulating 863 air yards last year. The point is, he's more versatile and more of a threat to pick up chunk plays than your typical slot receiver. Osborne's going to be productive as the third option in what I expect to be a much improved Vikings offense, at least from a fantasy perspective. We also get the upside of anything happening to Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen, and Osborne suddenly being thrust into the wide receiver 2 chair in a pass-friendly offense, just like we talked about with Josh Palmer. All right, let's go a little bit deeper. Those guys are deep, but I think we can go deeper. We can do it. We can go a little bit deeper. Let's talk some Zay Jones. Zay Jones emerged as quite productive at the end of last season with the Raiders. He averaged 8 targets per game over the final 8 weeks, which included 5 double-digit fantasy performances. He capped it off with 5 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown in Vegas' playoff loss to the Bengals. It was enough to land a new 3-year, $24 million deal with the Jaguars that includes $14 million in guarantees. A deal like that indicates to me that the team has a plan to use him. They have a plan for Zay Jones. I don't know if anybody's ever said that before, but the Jaguars do. They got a plan for Zay Jones. After all, the target competition in Jacksonville isn't exactly fierce. The projected wide receiver 1, Christian Kirk, he's never had a 1,000-yard season in 4 years in the NFL. After that, it's 32-year-old Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault. I still love you, Laviska. Still believe. We still believe. And Laquan Treadwell. Jones has a real shot at 80-plus targets in what is expected to be a much improved offense. Quarterback Trevor Lawrence is projected to take a big leap in his second season, especially with the coaching change to quarterback-friendly Doug Peterson taking over for Urban Meyer. Jones is not necessarily the guy you want to grab in your home league, but in deep formats or in best ball, he has an excellent chance at significantly outproducing his ADP. All right, this guy is being forgotten. Curtis Samuel is just out of sight, out of mind for the past year. I just feel like nobody's talking about him. Maybe I'm just missing it, but nobody's talking about Curtis Samuel. I saw a few clips from the beat reporters today. He's out there running some routes, working in 7-on-7 drills at Washington training camp. He has as much upside as any of these late round wide receivers. But there's obviously a reason why he's with these late round wide receivers. His 2021 was essentially a lost season. He battled a groin injury that started during training camp and lingered throughout the season, and his hamstrings were problematic as well. Even in his 5, quote, healthy games, Samuel saw limited action. So that's the downside, his health. His health is the downside. It's there, it's clear, we all know it. And plus the uncertainty that having Carson Wentz as your quarterback brings every week. And we also don't know for sure where he lands on the depth chart. With the selection of Jahan Dotson in the first round and possible, while unlikely, but possible ascension of second-year wideout Dyami Brown, Samuel could find himself as low as wide receiver 4. However, the upside of the situation is hard to ignore. After all, it was only a year ago that Washington signed Curtis Samuel to a 3-year deal with $23 million in guaranteed money. That was coming off back-to-back productive seasons in Carolina, which ended with 1,051 yards from scrimmage and 5 touchdowns on 77 receptions and 41 rush attempts in 2020. He earned a 19.1% target share and racked up 227 yards after the catch. His 14.1 fantasy points per game was good enough for a wide receiver 27 finish. With 4.31 speed and 93rd percentile burst, according to playerprofiler.com, Samuel has the athleticism to become an explosive playmaker out of the slot for Wentz and company. He's versatile enough to take snaps at running back, to be the team's primary deep threat, and gobble up yards after the catch on the underneath targets. I understand the health concerns. I really do. They're real. But that's why his ADP is so low. Fantasy gamers, they've almost written him off. That's why it's important to remember the upside is there. The upside is there, guys. And let's not forget, during his 2 best seasons in Carolina, 2019 and 2020, Samuel missed just 1 game. He can be healthy. He can do it. A healthy Samuel will be second on the team in targets with weekly upside to put up 15-plus fantasy points. All right, the last deep late round target we're going to talk about today is DJ Chark. Like Samuel, DJ Chark has been written off by fantasy gamers and some fantasy analysts after a lost 2021 season due to injury. Unlike Samuel, who battled soft tissue injuries throughout the season, Chark's injury was a fractured ankle in week 4. That ultimately ended his Jaguars career. So now he's in Detroit. Chark has an opportunity with the Lions to seize a role as the primary weapon down the field and on the perimeter for Jared Goff. Sure, Jameson Williams was drafted in the first round to be that guy, but he's still recovering from an ACL injury and will likely miss a good chunk of the season. Even when he's back, it's hard to imagine a rookie coming off that severe of an injury, having no offseason or training camp work with the offense. It's hard to imagine that guy's going to come in, step into a significant role upon his return. That means Chark, this is his job to lose. This is his job to lose. He's going to be that outside the numbers, down the field playmaker, while Amon-Ra St. Brown is the possession receiver with some help from TJ Hawkinson. We forget, but it wasn't long ago that Chark had a top 20 season in 2019. He caught 73 balls that season for 1,008 yards and 8 touchdowns. He has it on his resume. He's done it. And it's not like he had a great quarterback or a great offense in that season either. I believe Blake Bortles was his quarterback. He certainly has the size and the athleticism to get it done. He's 6'3". He's got blazing 4.34 speed. This guy is a playmaker. He's on a 1-year prove-it deal, and I absolutely expect that he will prove it. But that's going to be a wrap for today. Before I go, though, I want to remind you to check out our draft kit to help you dominate your drafts. Dominate your drafts with our draft kit. We have the latest ADP movers, cheat sheets, value finders for all the major platforms, rankings, projections, and more. Find that for free at yardsperfantasy.com/draft-kit, or just download the Yards Per Fantasy app in the App Store or on Google Play. You can also find Coach Bruce's 32 team previews, one dropping every day for 32 straight days. It's called Project 32. Coach does an incredible job breaking down these teams from coaching to key personnel, player projections, trends, and so much more. And the best part is each team preview is in support of a charity. Coach is so good about all that. Find that on the homepage at yardsperfantasy.com or in the draft kit. That's all I got. I'll see you guys next week. Same time, same place. Thanks, guys.